This is a session on biophilic design in context and our learning objectives. So what we're going to explore is sort of direct application of biophilic design. And so with me today is Lisa Hammond from Clif Bar and Nicole Isle from Glumac Engineering. And both of these companies are actively engaging in their own facilities biophilic design. And so we're going to learn from them what it means to do that, but what it means to do that in radically different contexts, radically different building types, different climates, and cultural situations. So ranging from an office in a historic building in Shanghai to an industrial bakery in Twin Falls, Idaho. So here are our objectives. So how many folks have seen the 14 patterns of biophilic design before? Yeah, lots of you. Well, and if you don't, and you don't remember all the patterns, we put a card in your seat, and if you don't have one, we have more, that has the 14 patterns on them. We're not really going to go through those so much today, but we are going to talk about some of the science that support those and what we're learning as we're watching people get the experience of implementing them. So one of the new pieces of science, this is a study that was published this summer that is really quite extraordinary. School children over the course of a year have a known progression in cognitive development. And there are standard tests around the world that track that and look at what happens with that progression each year with school children. And so this was a study in Barcelona involving more than 9,000 children where they looked at, does access to green space, and in this case they mean predominantly tree canopy, change the outcome, make a difference in cognitive performance. And so they looked at the amount of tree canopy around each kid's house, around their transit pattern from home to the school, and they looked at the amount of tree canopy in the schoolyards. And what they found was that the schoolyards with the highest amount of tree canopy, there was a significant shift upward in the cognitive development of those children over the course of that 13 months. So that tells us that biophilic design, experience of nature, has a direct cognitive impact, not just from a day-to-day standpoint, but an overall cognitive development. And when you're thinking about biophilic design, most of us hand me a list of 14 things, and I'm like, what do I do with that, right? It's just too many. So one of the ways to engage is to step back and say, what is it I'm trying to achieve? And because what we've learned is that, yes, there are 14 patterns, but not all of them support the same outcome. So some of them are really good at supporting cognitive performance. Others are really good at helping enhance creativity. Some are really important for helping with stress reduction. And so it's a way of filtering out what you're trying to do in the context of what your building type is or what your landscape is or the place that you're creating. What experience do you want to create for the people in that place, and then work backwards from there. Because the space directly impacts us. And it's not just a psychological impact, but you can see it in our heart rate, in our blood pressure, in the cortisol level, the serum cortisol, really good stress indicator, in our bodies. Sit in a charming space like this all day, is going to be a very, very different experience than sitting in a space like that. But biophilic design is not just cities and not just one place, but it's all over the world, and climates are radically different. And so how you take each of those patterns within a pattern language and think about applying them is going to change based on culture and climate. Just as things change over time as well, and how we've thought about what it means to have a nice office space, and the evolution of thinking about offices has changed radically over time as well. So if we start asking these questions about the desired outcomes, that's something we ask as a design team, something the client should be talking about, and then continuously monitor with the end users. And in fact, one of the pieces we're heavily recommending now is post-occupancy really be done when you do biophilic design, so you can actually map the outcomes to your use of patterns within the space. So how does the climate impact that? Well, you know, there are the infinity edge pool and the risk peril birdcage cantilevered over the 8th floor of this building, the tropical jungle on these that just has been planted when this was taken last year on these sky gardens. Well, you're probably not going to do that in Reykjavik, right? But then some cultural things can translate as well. So this is a Buddhist meditation platform in Brazil, right? So some things can translate from place to place, but it's always within what's the right context, what am I trying to achieve? So if we think about just, for instance, one pattern, material connection to nature, and we think about how that plays out, particularly with vernacular architecture, right? Vernacular architecture tells you frequently what's available there materially in that place, and how did people build in response to that over time. And we see people having that conversation even today, like this rammed earth house in Arizona. So if we unpack just one pattern, presence of water. And water's a really interesting one. We're learning, particularly the last year and a half, we've learned some really interesting things about how the brain responds to experiences of water. And it's partially because we typically experience water in more than one sense at a time. Typically when we see water, we also hear it as well. And what we're learning from the psychoacousticians in doing research in the UK and Germany is that water has this really interesting effect. When you have the sound of water in the space, even though it adds noise to the space, your brain perceives the space as being quieter. Not as a masking noise, but as a focus point. We love the sound of water. And so we'll pay attention to the sound of water and ignore all the other sounds around us. Sort of like when you're at a cocktail party and you're talking with your friend and it's really loud, but you're just having that conversation with your friend and your brain screens out all that other stuff around you. So water can be tiny, like in this little Japanese garden. It can be a natural water feature. It can be spectacular, like this fountain in Poland. Or it can be something for direct interaction. Or it can be something as simple as this rill running down the center of the plaza at the Salk Institute. And it's funny because when you visit the place, this amazing plaza, where do the people go? Well, check out where the kids are, right? Or it can be in this beautiful, still, classic pool in this building in Morocco. So one pattern can be done in an infinite different ways. What's appropriate culturally, what's appropriate climate-wise, what's appropriate with water availability in the case of water. And so here are some more. So we wanted to use that as sort of a framework to say, okay, so these are really adaptive and variable, but how do you actually apply them? And so I'm going to turn it over to Elise Hammond, and Elise is going to talk about their experience at Clif Bar.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I work for Clif Bar Company. We are a family and employee-owned company based in Emeryville, California. We've been around since 1992, and we make organic energy bars for athletes. You may have seen Clif Bar, Luna Bar, and maybe you saw Builder's Bar. So we started talking about biophilia back in 2007 when we were first exploring going to a new office space as we were growing. And we talked about our sustainability values, bringing those to life, and I work in sustainability, and they asked me, what is our sustainability vision for an office? And of course, it's going to be those things you think about, energy efficiency and zero waste, but really something was missing, and that was biophilia, that connection to nature. So our vision then in 2007 was to create an office environment where we connect to nature. And when you'll see this coming up in the slides, our sustainability program, which we started in 2001, is called our 5 aspiration business model. And that we are committed to sustaining business, brands, people, employees, the communities where we live and grow and make our food, and then the planet aspiration, which is environmental sustainability. And this is really important because this is our shared value system. This is what allows me to bring biophilia to the table and say it's part of the planet aspiration, although we now know it's part of all the aspirations. And this is what our VP of Engineering in the bakery I'm going to talk about. I said, what's been the most important part of incorporating biophilia into the bakery? He said it's because we're building off of this shared foundation of the 5 aspirations. So when you come into our office in Emeryville, California, you come to the aspiration wall because we're really trying to incorporate this into our culture, these values. And up on the wall, you'll see the journey, and it represents a journey that we're on, and it represents these 5 values that should be coming to the table in all our key decisions. So I'm going to talk today about this environment, this new office we went into in 2010, how we incorporated biophilia into this office environment with about more than 300 employees and an urban environment just south of Berkeley. Here's our office, about a little more than 100,000 square feet. And you'll see that it's in a former manufacturing plant in Emeryville that used to make propellers for submarines in World War II. It's covered in solar panels, and in the front end you see our child care center. So let's take a look inside and see how we bring biophilia to life in every day. We have 4 indoor atrium gardens where when it rains you see rainfall there. We have a light-filled environment with clear story windows all around. We have an organic cafe. We have, for example, this table where everyone gathers together. It's an environment that we're trying to foster connection with nature and connection with one another. And then you see us recycling over there near another one of the gardens. And here's what the office looks like from the 2nd floor. The entire office has this light. It has moving air throughout the day. And it's filled with things that represent our culture, a love of getting in the out of doors. So we have bicycles and kayaks and skis and snowboards and paddles that make up the decorations in the office. And we have more concrete ways that sustainability comes together. You can bring your dog to work. You can see this dog here is a little sad. He went over budget. But there's a lot of wonderful dogs, and having them in the office cheers you up as you walk around and see the French Bulldog in one department and the Chihuahuas in operations. But we also have a child care center, and we have been using different bicycle parts, like in this skylight right here, you see the decorations are made out of bike frames. So this is a great office right outside of Berkeley. How do we now incorporate Biophilia into the bakery that's currently under construction? We broke ground in March, and we said, we're bringing these 5 aspiration values, but Biophilia is going to show up in a very different way. We have 3 main challenges when we think about bringing that into a commercial bakery. The number one thing is food safety. We need a sterile environment. We cannot have air blowing in, open windows, dogs or plants, or even pictures that might gather dust. We can't have skylights where condensation might foster microbial growth, and we definitely can't have on the manufacturing floor a beautiful water element that would be a place where we might get bacterial growth. So number 1, food safety. Number 2, we have intellectual property. We can't have entire glass walls because we have our secret recipes and our proprietary ways of baking. And number 3 is we have a really different culture and environment. Instead of people working at the office 8 to 5, we're operating 24/7, 3 different shifts, and we have both people working on the line and in the office in rural southern Idaho. So here's an architectural rendering of the Clif Bar Bakery. We will not be having this beautiful green grass there, but we hope to have native plants. And I'm going to talk about 3 different ways we are incorporating Biophilia into the bakery. You saw this was this other close-up of where you enter the office. The 3 different areas are going to be outside the building, in the building, and then on the manufacturing floor. So we worked with Bill and his team after the designs were up and they felt like we'd done everything we could in sustainability. Again, Biophilia was the missing link. So we came to Terrapin and asked them to help us really look deeply at our plans. How and where could we incorporate Biophilia? So all these dots on the plans are their recommendations for us so we can engage in a conversation about how to incorporate Biophilia. We're on 80 acres of land. And so on that land, we plan to have, originally we planned a bike path because everyone loves to ride bikes. But now talking about it, we can also have meandering walking paths and native plants and pollinator habitat. We have places where you see water on the landscape, and we've always planned a big community garden. So people can leave work, participate in the garden, go on their break, and walk out on the trails. And we are planned to have raptor habitat, which is a great way to connect with natural systems and control rodents. And this is an internal view of where you come into the office and all the places you can connect with nature that's not on the manufacturing floor. For example, in G, that's our break room. This will have 2 walls that are open windows to see the mountains on the southern view. We have a wellness center, full window view. We have a team room where people can gather all together for events, and there's an amphitheater outside, and there's direct connection to the outdoors where we can have a water element. We'll have an atrium garden inside, and we will have also a small water element that's not connected to the full plumbing system, which might be dangerous, but just to have that small element of water and the sound of water when you come in, and we educate people about this commitment to the 5 aspirations and to connecting with nature. And then in the corridors, we can put in natural wood and stones from the Snake River Valley that are native to the area. And we'll continue to put in plants and all the other things you saw in our office, except we cannot do that on the manufacturing floor. So we've talked about what can we do? How can we bring nature into that space? A major way is through flooding the area with natural light, with clear story windows up at the top that bring light as deeply into the building as possible, but also windows all along the manufacturing line. It's one long manufacturing line from warehouse entry where ingredients come to where the products go out. And then we've decided we can have windows, but we can elevate them up to 7 feet to provide that intellectual property protection, and at the same time have windows that people can see out and see the clouds and see what's going on. We've also thought about creatively, how do we bring more nature into that space without introducing places for microbes to grow? So we're looking at on the big walls to have project photos. As you know, we have employees taking photos. We have a national park benefit where employees can get a national park pass, and they can bring their photos back, and these photos can cycle through slowly on the walls. We realize there's a lot of creative ways we can bring nature into the manufacturing floor, but it is a creative endeavor. And then one thing I've learned is how important that connection to nature is, even 5 minutes a day, when we have these opportunities, whether it be a corridor or a break room, for people to connect with nature before they go back on the floor. These are the trees we planted in March when we had the groundbreaking. There were no leaves, but in our groundbreaking ceremony, we wanted to have an alternative to the regular shoveling of dirt. And so we said these represent our 5 aspirations and that we're in the community of Twin Falls and we want to plant roots. So when our bakery is done, these trees will then be planted on site. And here's our team at Clif Bar that was present at that bakery. And I just want to tell you a couple things. Is when this was unveiled and people saw the mountains on the edge of the bakery plan, I heard this gasp of awe. That's the Grand Tetons. Because people immediately connected to place. And we talked about we're going to plant pollinator habitat, butterfly habitat. And I heard again that feeling of, wow. So I want to see small things make an impact. This is what it's all about. Here are the construction workers right now as this part of the walls go up. This biophilia is about philia, feeling by nature and feeling good, reducing stress, being more attentive. We realize that this has, for me, has been the missing link in sustainability. And I'm just really amazed at how it delivers value in every part of our company. And I know I'm forgetting something important, but we'll talk about it later. But to put this in context, to take a big picture view, look in the back of the building under construction. You will see a state-of-the-art food manufacturing plant. This plant has no windows at all, no landscaping around, but it has been designed to produce food with the highest food safety standards possible. So we really need to think now how biophilia can deliver a beautiful working environment, not just a food safety product. So thank you very much.
Nicole?
Hi everyone, my name is Nicole Isle. I lead sustainability programs at Glumac. We're a 280 employee engineering design firm, and we specialize in energy engineering supported by mechanical, electrical, plumbing, commissioning, and lighting design. We're a West Coast based firm with 9 offices, and we have 1 in Shanghai, which I'm going to talk about today. China, as we know, China operates at a much faster pace than North America. Its GDP growth rate is 3 times that of the US, and it supports the largest population in the world. So what this means is the further removal and distance of people from nature. And our biology and our ability to survive is inherently connected, deeply connected to nature. Glumac's first office in Shanghai was pretty typical, aside from our signature Glumac green. And it had a variety of collaboration spaces, so an open work environment, decent daylight, but employees didn't have much of an opportunity to vary their thermal comfort, lighting, and so we wanted to do something different when we outgrew this space. So when we set off to look for a new location, we're looking for two things. We were looking for a willing landlord, and we are looking for full control of the space. And Glumac likes to use our offices as testing grounds for the latest technology, high performance design, and so we wanted to look for a clean slate, something that we could put our best engineering expertise to work. Now, Shanghai supports the largest population in China, 25 million people. So the idea of biophilic design kind of comes off as a fairy tale in a place like that. But really, essentially, our biology, everything what it means to be human is the same no matter where you are in the world. And so that's where our biophilic story begins, is with place and finding meaning in place. A good mix of culture, history, and ecology, a place that you could fall in love with. So we located our place in the Chongqing district, sited on a historic campus that was originally constructed for the John D. Rockefeller family in 1913. It was apparently designed by the famous American architect, Louis Sullivan. You can see the Rockefeller Mansion on your left and the building that supports our office on the right. That building was one of the residence homes that was on the campus constructed with the mansion. So it has an interesting history. The Rockefellers actually never used the mansion, and it became a military control headquarters during the 1920s when various warlords were fighting over control of China. It changed hands, became a military residence and library over time, and then in 2001, a private developer leased the space. In 2011, they added a floor to the building that we're in, and we lease 5,000 square feet there. To show a little bit of the floor plan, we started with some pretty good bones in terms of incorporating what mattered to us most for biophilic design, and that is great daylight, a lower ceiling, but we had dormers, we had light shafts, and operable windows. We also had access to this great terrace, so we had a really interesting palette to start with. The floor plan is pretty simple: private offices, open workspaces, and a series of meeting rooms next to a bistro. Our #1 design goal being that the office is located in a urban area with poor air quality was to have excellent indoor air quality. We want it to be a very healthy place for our employees, and as sustainability-minded engineers, this was foremost in responding to the climate conditions of Shanghai. We also wanted the design to be nested in the cultural context and the ecology of the site. There's a lot of mature vegetation on the campus, and it's an absolute just reprieve and place of just of rest, really, in the busy hustle bustle of the surrounding neighborhood. We wanted to incorporate that into the design. We're also pursuing advanced performance through net zero energy, net zero water design. We're using low energy heating, cooling, ventilation systems, a lot of insulation to start with, and we're managing our plug and lighting loads. We're also collecting rainwater. We're collecting dehumidification condensate. We are using composting toilets, and we designed the water system to supply drinking water to the office as soon as the landlord allows us to flip the lever. So our office is pursuing the Living Building Challenge, full PETAL certification, as well as it's a LEED V4 Platinum certified. And that's the first project in Asia to do so. We installed a 45 kW solar PV array and started our LBC performance period this month, so we hope to certify in a year. Gensler was our design partner, and they did a really great job just helping us blend the historic context of the site and the ecology with a modern high-performance space. Bill came in and helped us with suggestions around biophilic design, helping us to understand how a combination of strategies can really help elevate the human experience in the space. So let's take a tour here. As you enter the front entrance to the building, or to our office, you see these Chinese lucky clouds. These are natural analogs. This is a symbol drawn from nature, but rooted in traditional Chinese culture. Chinese lucky clouds are a sign of good fortune and happiness, and they greet you at the front door. Kind of breaks up the simplicity of the design in the glass. When you enter the reception area, more natural analogs and a good mix of them. So this whimsical organic shaped feature called a Cavadat cloud winds through the lobby, and you'll see it wind through the remainder of the office space. Really helps break up the linearity of the design, and it's fun and simple, and adds the little biomorphic patterns to the space. Also, most wood in China is imported, and so we use salvage boards to create a few key signature pieces in the space, using natural materials. Helps also draw the patina of the historical context of the site inside the office. It's a nice blend with a modern design. And then again, we repeated the Chinese lucky clouds in these elegant reception stools here. So assembling a Cavadat cloud is no easy task, and our furniture designers, Hayworth, put together a party for us, a work party, to help us design one of our own. You can create any size of those. You can create a pattern across any shape, any fixture, any side of a inside space, and they're really great. So you can see the Cavadat cloud peeking into our bistro area here, where you're greeted by a gathering table made of salvaged wood. The west side of the office space can receive some glare in the afternoon. When the sun is low, you can flip a switch and the glass tints, and that helps create some differing conditions, light conditions in the space. You know, varying that element and bringing a little bit of stimulation and a bit of control for employees. So when you go out to the terrace, you see the Rockefeller Mansion. You're immediately connected to that site, and the mature vegetation really helps absorb sound from the surrounding urban busyness. We paved the terrace in salvaged traditional Shanghai gray brick, which you'll see in a lot of the oldest architecture in the city. In the bistro space, it looks out onto the work environment. And as engineers, you know, thermal comfort, light quality, and occupant controls are central to our understanding of biophilic design. So here you can see a little peek hole into the radiant floor, which heats and cools the space. And then the dormer windows and operable windows for employees to use when the outside conditions are satisfactory enough to open those. And just the idea of opening a window when the air quality is pretty decent outside, and the air quality conditions can be quite fine in Shanghai. You get a nice breeze, it stimulates the senses, and immediately it's like having a cup of coffee and getting your second wind for the rest of the day. And just having that ability to do that makes people feel like they can tailor their environment. They've created a work condition that suits them, and they can be as productive as they need to be in their workspace. Here you can see a little more of the controllability features that we provided. These are fully adjustable LED Tambient task lights. They emit light down to the work surface as well as up and creating ambient light conditions. So it's a primary lighting source for us in the office. We also continuously monitor air quality in this space. And then a little bit of intrigue and mystery at the end of the hall. There's this green fuzzy thing that sort of lures you down. Our air filtration process is 3-stage. It's pretty intense and captures even the finest of particles. And our Living Building Challenge material consultant, Giga, based in Shanghai, worked with another local company that does indoor air quality testing called Pure Living. They developed this app. And this app allows our employees, and I have it downloaded on my own phone, shows indoor air conditions in the space as compared to the outdoor air quality pulled from the US Shanghai consulate. It also provides information on temperature, humidity, VOCs in the space. So at the end of the hall, you can see the green wall here. And the ductwork is pretty slim and discrete. It kind of reminds me of the dendritic patterns of tree limbs. And the green wall was interesting because we were really excited about it at first. Then it did some surprising things, and it unfortunately led to a sad ending. So we planted it, and we realized that it was emitting a whole lot of CO2, and we're failing our indoor air quality tests. And that was because the plants were establishing themselves. The roots were decaying, and so it was emitting a lot of CO2 instead of taking in CO2 and creating oxygen. So once the plant's established, then the CO2 conditions returned to normal, but the light shelf overhead that we thought would be great in providing light and really, allowing the green wall to thrive was actually burning the leaves because the green wall is planted in ferns, and ferns are a low light species. And ferns also require a lot of water. And we were using our conditioning condensate to water the wall, but it was still kind of a real pretty maintenance intensive effort. And so we replaced it with mother's tongue, and mother's tongue is a well-known indoor plant. It's known to absorb indoor air pollutants. And so that's our story about our green wall in Shanghai. Lastly, meeting rooms. We have operable partitions. They can close and create, intimate spaces. They can open and house large gatherings. We have LED, fully dimmable, addressable lighting to create that variability in lighting conditions in the space for our employees to really tailor the work environment to their needs. So when you open these walls up, we can house quite a few people in this space, and it's received quite a bit of attention. We've been educating whoever is interested about sustainable design during the construction of this space. This is our wonderful contractor, Shimizu, talking to a group of school children. And we like to think that through this whole effort, through the 2 years since we've been designing this space and now occupying it, that we're planting a seed of change, just showing a different perspective, making a very small step forward in what sustainable design could be in China. Thank you.
So what have you learned? It was interesting. So the green wall failed. At one point when we saw the design, we were told, no windows, no windows, no clerestories, no windows at all, and now windows. So how did, and there was evolution in your design, and some of the space design, and getting prospect in, and changing the configuration for that distant view. Culturally, how did you guys do those?
Well, it's interesting. We started with goals of the Living Building Challenge, and looking for a space that would help support those goals was pretty tough. And the idea of even having operable windows, does it really make sense to have operable windows in Shanghai? And really what we're doing is designing for a future where those operable windows will be open more often than closed, because you get the nice fresh air and you can feel that sensation across your skin. And it goes the same with the biophilic design, choosing a place where it had the bones to create those connections with nature, and a space where we could put in the controllability for lighting and comfort for our employees. So I think those are the kind of the surprises and important elements of our design.
And what I'd say, I've really learned how important it is to continue follow-up, to educate, to use the science-based education about biophilia, but it's a new concept. So if you're bringing everyone to the table, architects and engineers, and you're hearing about these concepts, I feel like once is not enough. You know, we were always committed to clear story windows, but there was a concern that windows at eye level could be a distraction for people in manufacturing. There was a concern, is that dangerous to have a view? And the research, the science shows no, it actually increases attention span, it decreases stress. So, but what I did learn is going back a second time to have a second review. Let's go back again and see if we've incorporated as many biophilic recommendations as possible. A second review brought us again to more ways to adopt biophilia. And then I've recently gone back again and said, are we still on track for incorporating all these things? And every time we go back and revisit biophilia and look at the science, we're better able as a community to adopt these. So my recommendation is follow up, follow up, follow up.
Yeah, there's some aspects of both projects that I really love. You know, in the factory, in the public spaces or the non-processing spaces, there is a surfeit of biophilic design measures, because realizing that the folks on the factory floor aren't there continuously. There's back and forth. And so during their break periods, during their lunches, during their meetings, they can get sort of full immersion in the biophilic design aspects, and then have limited stuff in the manufacturing setting itself. And so that's been really interesting to watch that dialogue and watch that happen with your designers. And I love the idea of, we know that simulated nature is beneficial. It's not as beneficial as real nature, but since we can't have plants and animals and natural materials inside the processing area, I love this idea of projection, a huge projection of happy person in nature eating a Clif Bar. I mean, it's just, it's like, there's the culture, and they have this amazing library, and you can even see it some of them on their website, of their employees and their customers on a mountain, on a beach, on a kayak with the product. And so that was a really fun blend and a way to say how we display what the company's about within the space.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting in bringing, biophilia is not something new that you bring to the table. I think inherently you're incorporating biophilic elements in every design. It's just that you're more cognizant of those elements and the benefits of those elements, and maybe what it helps to do is help you create a new combination of those elements to really stimulate the senses. I mean, we work off of all 5 senses all the time. And right now you're smelling a bit, although it's kind of a bit stale. Pretty, there's not a lot of variations like walking through a garden, but you're mainly seeing. In an office space, we wanted to all those 5 senses to be alive, to have a bit of sound when the terrace doors are open or when the windows are open. To have the variability and conditions of the Cavadat cloud with the Chinese historic symbols. And a lot of those ideas came from the employees. It's like, what do you love? I mean, if you think about the elements you really love, you may think about your home, the way that you orchestrate the various spaces in your home, the furniture you choose, the elements that remind you of special places or people in your life. And so that's what our employees did in brainstorming what they wanted to get out of this office space to make it a place that they truly love and get excited about inviting people to that space. And I think biophilia helps bring to light the real benefit and merit of going through that exercise. And it's enlightening, and it empowered our employees.
Okay. So we'd love to open it up to questions. Have we said anything that provoked something that you'd like to ask about their experiences here? And we've got, they're recording this, so if you don't mind going to the microphone, please. And tell us who you are.
My question was, when you're using an existing building, how do you decide what you're going to incorporate versus what you're going to scrap and start over?
Well, it's probably never a good idea to fall in love with something that you may have to scrap. I mean, in the case of this space, you know, the daylight and the location was there, and that's what we really wanted to design off of in the foundation of our Biophilic design approach. The space was a completely clean palette. I mean, the pictures that I showed didn't, we didn't go through a demo effort to get to that state, although they did attempt to put in about 1 inch of insulation. We walk in the space, we're like, I wonder how much insulation is there, and we look at it, and we just like poke the pencil through, and we're like, it's about that much, so that we knew we needed to change that.
And the existing building that we went into was that office, and so we loved the bones with these huge windows and the atrium gardens. Those were the original part. That was an example of manufacturing during World War II, where electricity was too expensive to not use natural light. So we really wanted to keep our office kind of scrappy, so we didn't change that much.
Vivian Lofness. I'd like to ask you a little bit about the decision not to have windows because of information of sort of secret recipes that would be stolen. Yeah. At this point, it would seem that it's certainly possible to provide views, both near and distant views, without in any way endangering information flow. And the critical value to the employees in a manufacturing to have some both local and distance views seems like it would be so fantastic. Yeah. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, that, you know, just to be clear, so they went up from a 5-foot windowsill. Right now we're planning a 7-foot windowsill. So that you do still see, you can see trees, you can see clouds. There's, it's not recipes really, it's the kind of equipment you're using in baking. And so this is really, it's not my decision in sustainability. I have to be very respectful of the whole decision to do this. But we are revisiting. There are places where you don't have equipment that you want to not reveal completely. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, but what has been very exciting to me is that we went from this idea of, first of all, understanding it's not a distraction. We can have windows, and then instead of just saying no lower windows at all, can we just move them up? So this is what I am talking about go back, talk again, understand what the challenges are, and then see if the science supports it or other creative alternatives support an option. And I have a feeling that we'll end up with different levels of windows, but always being respectful of what people who know more than I do about baking decide.
Yeah, and when you see that landscape around the building, and you know they're actually planting trees, and there's an irrigation ditch that'll become an artificial stream course, and you know them creating landscape there, and then you see the other company's traditional plant across the street where it's literally pavement and dirt. That's pretty extraordinary. And when we first saw it, our first thought was, oh, well, why aren't there plants around the building? It's like, no, not allowed to. So that's when the idea, oh, okay, so it's all about rodent control. Well, let's take this a step further and connect with the local ecosystem and bring in nature's rodent control and put in some raptor nesting platforms there, and people will get to see nature in full action.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. And for food manufacturing, there are safety laws. So you do have to have a certain distance from a food manufacturing plant that you don't have plants. But then beyond that, we have 80 acres. We'll have a community garden, we'll have raptors, we'll probably have beehives.
My name is Jim Hambright. I was about 10 years ago working on a project in the Philippines, and it was a electronic facility, had very similar manufacturing requirements for light control and contamination control. We employed, went through a process of using the security cameras in a windowless area to provide streaming, not exactly a natural solution, but streaming of the outside through television cameras. Didn't know if you had ever considered using something like that versus, say, photographs or some other artificial means to bring in the outside, which would also lead potentially to bringing in, not commercialization, but like if you wanted to travel, have a certain day where you would have an ocean voyage day or something unusual like that, that would be something unique for the employees, and didn't know if that was something that was considered when you have an issue like the window restriction criteria or the manufacturing criteria where you really don't want light or have to have control access in.
There's good work out there on the introduction of simulated nature, particularly use of video screens to show live what's outside. Peter Kahn, in particular at the University of Washington, did a multi-year study and asked, is that enough? Or, is it the same as a real view out of a window? And what we learn is that when you look at differentials, psychological response, heart rate and blood pressure to a real view or the simulated view, both psychologically elicit a good response. The simulated view will lower heart rate and blood pressure over no view, but the real view will add substantially to that. It's a much higher response, and it has to do with no matter how good a simulated view is, no matter what angle you look at that, it's still going to be the same image. And so the brain says, okay, that's kind of it, but it's not it. And so the physiological response is different. We did discuss it somewhat in their case, and part of the issue is that it's a 24-hour operation, and because of the way the lighting works and what the landscape outside is in that sort of dead zone around the perimeter, that view outside at night is really sort of limited. So having the clerestories where you could maybe see some of the stars helps, and you'll see some of the landscape outside, but the idea was instead to use this the series of pictures instead of doing artificial windows. But there is good research, particularly in hospitals and recovery wards, of doing the artificial windows where you have a sterile environment.
Hi, my name is Mary Ellen Ivanko. I'm with Gensler in Baltimore. Hi, Glumac. Bill, I'm curious, and to the project teams, at the beginning of the presentation, you had a slide with specific scientific outcomes or measures based on different biophilic strategies. From the design side, as Nicole mentioned, a lot of it comes very naturally to designers, how we want to strategize and design our spaces. So I'm curious for both of you on your design projects, did you have specific employee issues or scientific metrics that you wanted to address and add that research lens to the project, say stress relief? I don't know how the bakers, if they have specific issues that you would have wanted to find a specific strategy for.
We had a post-occupancy survey. We asked our employees what they like about the space, didn't like about the space, a thermal comfort survey, and then also around the natural elements incorporated into the space, like biomorphic patterns of the Cavadat cloud, for example, and just get their reactions. Overwhelmingly, employees love the space. It's social science is pretty gray when it comes to, the hard metrics and outcomes, and there's always going to be variability, but employee satisfaction went way up, and we're hiring like mad in that office right now, and it attracts a lot of attention from the design community and sustainable interest community around Shanghai. And you had a question about, metrics. So air quality, I talked about that. That was #1 for us. We measured it during construction. It's continuously monitored and updated in real time to the app for employees. Air quality is such a major concern, and when it comes to having healthy conditions so people can be as productive as possible and live out their potential, air quality is of #1 concern in the workplace in Shanghai to those who are enlightened to the desperate conditions. And so that's something that we wanted to measure and improve, and we continue to do that. So I'm happy to give you the app and you can download it.
I think that matrix that showed all the scientific support for especially the connection with nature and everything you would want to do in a manufacturing plant, to have less stress, to have greater attention. What was the third one?
Enhanced creativity.
And enhanced creativity. Those, we used that information to support the things that we want to do, like the landscaping. Some of, everyone here knows you have a big construction job. It's under construction right now, and so there's a lot of demands on attention. So we have decided to build out the landscaping part after the building is up and running, and we can also understand where people naturally go. Where do they want to hang out as we create this biophilic landscape? So I'm not sure if that answered the question correctly, but the science is very important for validating the reason that we should go the extra mile.
I think there's real strong science around having different geometries in the space, so you can have a sense of prospect and look across the space and orient yourself and rest your eyes before going back to your computer and looking at a two-dimensional object. And so having like a terrace for employees to be able to have that sort of vista makes a lot of sense and has been shown to really help rest the body so that you can recuperate quickly and go back to work and be productive the rest of the day. So it's those sort of studies that are like in Terrapin's report on the economics of biophilia, and also in the design guide around 14 patterns, is the basis to the design for our space, and gave inspiration to what we felt would be most important for our employees.
My name is William McGavin. I'm a student and president of the University of Alabama Green Building Council. And what are some introductory biophilic projects y'all would recommend to implement at universities? Something students could implement for the universities.
You want to start, Bill?
Katie and I got engaged in conversation at UVA about that. And what they were looking at, the first interventions were actually some landscape interventions along pedestrian paths, because they had a section where there were a bunch of dorms and people would walk down this crazy busy street, and it was kind of dangerous. And so they wanted to get people to transit a different path on the other side of the buildings, but that would be a longer walk. And so what they were looking at, and the design teams were looking at, were interventions within the landscape that would make that a much more pleasant, a better experience, so that you would much rather, even though it was another 3-minute walk, you would much rather walk along that path on the other side of the buildings than walk on that crazy, dangerous street. So that's sort of one. But also, as we're seeing on some campuses, the movement to direct engagement with agricultural activities, gardens and things like that, that's a really profound connection because you see the thing grow, you take care of it. So that makes a really profound connection to place, which is one of the reasons why Clif Bar is doing this process of, rather than instant landscape, the landscape will evolve with the interaction of their own staff on that site.
I'm pretty fascinated by the comparison study in open workspace environments and the relationship between prospect and refuge. So the design of open office environments creates that condition of collaboration and chance meetings that lead to wonderful creative ideas. But it also can increase acoustics and level of noise in the space. And so with having prospect, you have this ability, safety in seeing all around you and seeing just the variation in distance. And then in refuge, you've got an enclosed space that's protective that you can call your own, like sitting on the terrace overlooking the Rockefeller Mansion, or sitting on the front porch of your home, or sitting in a booth at a restaurant, it feels just cozy and intimate. And so that relationship, what is that perfect kind of size of workstation, the height of the partition walls, the surrounding materials and their ability to absorb sound. What is that perfect relationship in an open workspace office environment between prospect and refuge? I think that would be a really interesting study.
Hi, my name is Matt Krieger, and I'm an architect in Iowa City. Question really for the Shanghai office. I was glad to see the app that tells them about air quality, but wondering then if it also sends them notifications to close the operable windows. And then as part of that, since you incorporated a radiant flooring system, does it do both heating and cooling? And does it also then notify them to close the windows or turn off sensors when the system's running?
Yeah, the radiant flooring does heating and cooling, and the windows, there's no notification or connection to the HVAC system. That's something that we incorporate in our design in larger spaces. In that space, it's quite small. They're 30 employees now, and they're a family, and so they basically talk to each other, and no one wants open windows when the outside air quality is bad. They feel it on their way to the office in the morning. So I think it's just it's a group think in how they respond.
So I'm getting the sign that we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming and joining us this afternoon. And we hope maybe we can do more with you next year.